She was not supposed to be the one to save him. Nobody warned Lucien Marchetti that the woman refilling champagne glasses on the 43rd floor would be the most dangerous person in the room. Not his security detail. Not his intelligence network. Not the 3 men he had paid very well to keep him breathing for another year. None of them saw her. But Lucien did. He always noticed the ones who were trying not to be noticed. The Winter Charity Gala was the kind of event that existed to remind ordinary people that power had its own language. It was spoken in Italian suits and Russian diamonds, in the way men laughed too long at jokes that were not funny, in the way women smiled at people they despised. The top floor of the Hartwell Tower was all glass and chandelier light, and the city lay below it like a map of everything these people owned. Lucien Marchetti stood near the east window with a glass of scotch he had no intention of drinking, watching the room the way a man watches a river he knows carries something dangerous underneath. He had arrived 10 minutes early. He always arrived early. It gave him time to count the exits, read the staff rotations, and identify the faces that did not belong. Tonight there were several. 2 new men stood near the kitchen corridor wearing catering uniforms that fit too well. A third was positioned at the bar with his back against the wall and his eyes moving in a pattern that had nothing to do with taking orders. The service elevators, which should have been cycling between floors all evening, had been sitting still for the last 8 minutes. And the private security that usually guarded the stairwell on this floor had quietly disappeared. Lucien took a slow sip of his undrunk scotch and did not change his expression. He was scanning the room for the 4th man when he found her instead. She was moving along the far wall carrying a tray of glasses, adjusting the placement of a centerpiece that no guest would ever notice, pausing near the window for just a breath too long. Long enough to check the reflection. He was not admiring the view. She was using the glass as a mirror, studying the room behind her without turning around. Lucien recognized the technique because it was his own. She wore a white server's uniform that matched a dozen others in the room. But her eyes never went to the guests the way the other staff watched them, with that performance of polite attention. Her eyes went to hands. She tracked hands the way a chess player tracks the board, reading intention before it became movement. And when her gaze finally crossed the room and found his, it did not slide away quickly the way a server's would. It held for exactly 2 seconds. Long enough to tell him she already knew who he was. Lucien set his glass down on a passing tray and moved. He did not walk toward her directly. He drifted, stopping to exchange a word with a senator whose name he had already forgotten, accepting a handshake from a real estate developer who laughed at nothing, letting the room carry him naturally in her direction. By the time he was within range, she had moved to the edge of the crowd near a display of white orchids. She was not looking at him. But she had stopped moving. She was waiting. He positioned himself beside her, facing the orchids, and did not say a word. Neither did she. For a moment there was only the sound of the orchestra warming up near the far end of the ballroom and the low current of conversation around them. Then, without turning, without dropping her professional expression even a fraction, she spoke in a voice so quiet it barely disturbed the air between them. "They are erasing you tonight." Lucien smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was the only response that would not give anything away to the men watching from the corners of the room. "Then stay with me," he said. Behind him he caught it in his peripheral vision, the slow, deliberate movement of 2 hands disappearing inside 2 jackets. He had maybe 30 seconds before the orchestra played its first note. He turned from the orchids, smiled at a woman across the room who smiled back automatically and kept moving, kept breathing, kept building the picture. The champagne trays were doing what mirrors do best, telling the truth. He watched the reflections shift as he moved through the crowd, tracking angles, counting positions. 4 men inside the ballroom, spaced in a pattern designed to cut off movement toward the emergency exits on the north and south ends. 1 more on the rooftop of the building across the street. He had clocked that scope glint when he arrived, filed it, and said nothing. And the exits, he now confirmed, were sealed. Not physically. Digitally. Someone had locked the fire door system from a remote terminal. The woman appeared at his side again. She had exchanged her tray for a linen cloth and was polishing a table near the east wall, her back to the room, speaking at a volume only he could catch. The attack begins on the third song, she said. The conductor has been paid. Everyone in this room becomes a loose end after you're gone. Lucien said nothing for a moment. He was running calculations. The third song was 4 minutes away at the orchestra's current pace. 4 minutes to understand exactly what he was standing inside of. Dance with me, he said. She looked at him then, a quick, flat look that said this was not what she had expected. But she set the linen cloth down and walked onto the dance floor, and Lucien followed, and when he placed his hand at her waist and moved with her into the dance rotation of couples. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, his eyes moving over her shoulder to a waiter near the east wall. "Someone who made the wrong choice 2 years ago," she said. "My name is Claire. I'm a blockchain security consultant. I was hired by a syndicate to move digital money. I didn't know what the money was for until I was already inside. And tonight is a cryptocurrency transfer. Hundreds of millions. Moving through shell accounts tied to this building's network while everyone is distracted celebrating charity." She paused. "The gala is the cover. The transfer is the real event. And you are the distraction they need. A dead mafia boss, a rival family to blame, a city that spends the next 6 months at war while the syndicate disappears with the funds." Lucien turned her slowly, watching the man near the bar adjust his position. "You came here to stop it?" "I came here because my brother is missing." The words were measured, but something beneath them was not. He was an accountant. He found records, financial records linking the syndicate to weapons contracts, to officials, to people who have no business being connected to any of this. They made him disappear 4 months ago. They told me if I helped tonight, if I made sure you walked into this room, they would give me proof that he was still alive. She exhaled once quietly. Then I realized what help meant. And I realized they were going to end everyone in this room afterward. Including me. The music swelled around them. Couples moved. Crystal glasses caught the light. Lucien said nothing for 5 seconds. He was thinking about the first warning she could have given him. Outside the building hours ago, a phone call, an anonymous message, and how she had chosen to wait until they were face to face. That told him something important about how much she trusted the world outside this room. "You could have walked away," he said. "So could you," she said. "But here we are." He almost smiled at that. Almost. The orchestra changed tempo. Not the third song, the second. They had less time than he thought. 30 seconds, she whispered. And her hand tightened slightly at his arm, not with fear. With precision. Lucien felt it then, the shift in the room's pressure. The way a storm feels before the first sound. Cell signal was dead. He had noticed his phone going dark 2 minutes ago but had waited to confirm it was not the building. It was not the building. The jamming was deliberate, targeted, designed to keep whatever happened on this floor contained. The private security teams were gone from the floor entirely now. The elevator indicator above the East Bank had not moved in 11 minutes. The entire skyscraper had become a sealed room. Lucien let go of Claire's hand. She looked at him just once, and what passed between them in that look was not a plan. It was an understanding. The understanding that people who have been surviving alone for too long sometimes reach when they realize they are, for one moment, not alone. Then he walked toward the stage. The orchestra director noticed him first. Then the guests nearest the front. A ripple of confusion moved through the room as Lucien Marchetti, a man these people knew by reputation if not by name, stepped onto the platform and lifted the microphone from its stand with the calm of someone who had been expected. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, and the room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something in the air tells every instinct to stop. "This building has been compromised. There are armed individuals positioned inside this ballroom. The exits have been sealed remotely. No one is leaving until this is resolved." He paused. "I apologize for the disruption to your evening." For 2 full seconds nothing happened. Then the room broke apart. Voices. Movement. The sound of chairs scraping back. A woman near the front dropped her champagne glass, and the crash of it seemed to unlock something, because then everyone was moving at once. Toward the exits, toward each other, toward their phones that would not connect. And out of the chaos, moving against the current like a man who had planned for exactly this, came Vincent Kesler. He was 60, silver-haired, the kind of man whose face had appeared on the covers of financial magazines and the walls of hospital wings he had funded. He held both hands up as he moved through the panicking crowd, his voice a practiced instrument of calm. "Please," he said. "Please, everyone, let's not." "Sit down, Vincent," Lucien said from the stage. Kesler stopped. Something moved behind his eyes, quick and cold and then gone. He looked up at Lucien with a confused expression that was technically perfect and not convincing at all. Claire appeared at Lucien's side. She had crossed the room in the chaos and now stood close enough to speak directly into his ear. "Kesler built the foundation as a front 20 years ago," she said. "Every charity event, every donated hospital wing, every public appearance. It has all been a mechanism for moving money. Billions through offshore crypto wallets. He is not a philanthropist who funds criminals. He is the criminal who funds the philanthropist." Lucien looked at the man below the stage. Kesler was still performing calm, but his eyes had gone to the exits the way a man's eyes go to exits when he is calculating. "He was not just trying to kill you," Claire said. "Everyone who could connect him to tonight's transfer. The staff, the guests who overheard the wrong conversation, the people he brought in to handle the operation, they were all scheduled to disappear." The lights went out. Not a flicker. Not a gradual fade. A complete, instant darkness that swallowed the ballroom whole. For one breath the room was completely silent, as if the darkness had taken the sound too. Then the first shot rang out and the screaming began. Lucien moved before the echo died. He had already mapped the room. He always mapped the room, and he crossed the distance to the marble bar in 4 steps, reaching back for Claire in the dark and pulling her down behind the bar counter as a burst of rounds shattered the glass wall above them, raining across the bar top in a cascade of light and sound. His security team was moving. He could hear it. The controlled responses, the positioning, the language of men who had been trained for rooms like this one. He did not know how many of Kesler's people they would contain. He knew they would not contain all of them. "The ledger," he said to Claire low and fast. "Already started," she said. And she had her phone out, a device that somehow, impossibly, still had a signal in the dead zone. She had come prepared with a bypass. Of course she had. "I copied the encrypted financial files 6 weeks ago. Every transaction, every account number, every name. Politicians, judges, law enforcement officials at 3 levels of government. International buyers across 9 countries." She was uploading as she spoke. Fragments pushed through the bypass to a server she had set up for exactly this moment. "It is going public in pieces. By the time anyone can respond, enough of it will be out that it cannot be suppressed." Lucien looked at her in the fractured darkness. "You have been planning this for 6 weeks. For months," she said. "Since my brother disappeared." He held her gaze for one moment. Then he said, "Move." They crossed the ballroom in the confusion and chaos. Lucien reading the room by sound and reflex, pulling Claire through gaps between bodies and furniture, keeping them below the sight lines of the men his security team had not yet reached. The emergency stairwell door was 30 feet away when 2 figures stepped out of the shadows and into their path. There was no warning. No words. Just the movement, fast and trained and certain. Lucien handled the first man. It was not clean or elegant. It was fast and necessary, and when it was done, he turned to find Claire already dealing with the second. She moved with a stillness that came from practice. Not fighting exactly, but something more precise than that. And when she stepped back, the man was on the ground and there was a small blade in her hand that she folded away without drama. Lucien looked at her. "You are not a blockchain consultant," he said. "I am," she said. "I just had a complicated previous career." She nodded toward the stairs. "Roof. Now." They took the stairs fast through 2 empty floors and one that was not empty, and then they were pushing through the rooftop door and into the night. The storm hit them immediately. Wind and snow, the kind of February cold that feels like a wall you run into rather than weather you walk through. The helicopter was there, rotors already turning, its running lights cutting through the white. For one moment Lucien thought they had made it. Then he saw Kesler. The man stood between them and the helicopter, his silver hair catching the rooftop lights. A gun held with the steadiness of someone who had been holding guns long enough to stop feeling anything about it. The composed public face was gone. What was underneath it was not rage or panic. It was something colder than both. "You made this more complicated than it needed to be," Kesler said. Not to Lucien. To Claire. She said nothing. But Lucien felt her go still beside him. "Your brother," Kesler said, "was a problem that needed to be resolved. And it was. For months ago." He said it the way a businessman discusses a completed transaction. "The promises I made you were to ensure your cooperation. I regret that you required them." The sound Claire made was not a cry. It was smaller than that and somehow worse. The sound of something that had been holding together for a very long time finally reaching its limit. She had known. Somewhere under the 4 months of searching and hoping and moving carefully through the dark, she had known. Hearing it said aloud in the cold open air of a rooftop in February was something different. Kesler raised the weapon. Lucien started laughing. It was not the reaction Kesler expected. The gun faltered, just slightly, and in that fraction of hesitation Kessler's eyes narrowed. "The security camera on the northeast corner of this roof," Lucien said, gesturing casually over his shoulder, "has been transmitting a live feed for the last 11 minutes. Claire hacked the building's security network before we came up here. Every word you just said, every word you have said tonight, has been broadcast to a server that is distributing it in real time." He paused. "Federal intelligence is watching. 3 rival organizations are watching. And about 40,000 people online are watching, because Claire started the public stream 6 minutes ago." Kesler looked at the camera. Then back at Lucien. The mask did not fall. It simply became unnecessary and he let it go. "Then it doesn't matter," he said. "What happens next?" He turned the gun toward Claire. Lucien moved. The shot was loud in the open air. The snow swallowed the echo almost immediately. Lucien felt the impact at his left shoulder. A hard, burning pressure that dropped his left side but did not drop him. And by then he was already inside Kessler's reach, and what happened next was fast and final, and in the snow-blurred footage that would later be reviewed by 4 separate agencies, it would be recorded simply as, "The threat was neutralized." Kesler went down. Lucien stood over him in the snow, breathing hard, his left hand pressed to his shoulder. The wind had not stopped. The helicopter was still turning. In the distance, cutting through the white sky from the east and the south, the lights of approaching aircraft were beginning to appear, the kind with searchlights and official frequencies. He turned around. Claire was still standing where he had left her, and for a moment she looked like someone who had forgotten what to do with her hands when the crisis was over. The wind pulled at her silver uniform. The snow was catching in her hair. And her face, the controlled, calculating face that had watched hands instead of eyes and read rooms instead of people, had finally stopped performing. She was just a woman in a snowstorm who had learned 11 minutes ago that her brother was not coming home. Lucien walked back to her. He did not say that he was sorry. He did not say that it would be all right. He did not offer her any of the useless words that people use when they cannot bear to stand in silence next to someone else's loss. He stood beside her in the snow and the cold and the sound of rotors and distant sirens, and when she did not speak, he did not speak either. After a moment she said, "We need to go." "We do," he said. She looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the calculation she had run in the ballroom, not the rapid assessment she had made in the stairwell, but the kind of look that happens when a person stops treating another person as a variable and starts seeing them as something else entirely. She saw a man standing in the snow with a wound in his shoulder, not asking for anything, not filling the space with performance or power. Just standing there. "You took that bullet," she said. "You warned me in a room full of people who wanted me dead," he said. "Considerate even." Something crossed her face that was almost a different kind of pain. The kind that comes from being seen by someone when you have spent years making sure no one could see you. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. Then he nodded toward the helicopter. "Come on." They were in the air before the first federal vehicles reached the building's entrance. The city woke up the next morning to find itself in the middle of a story no one had written yet. The arrests came first, 17 in the initial hours, Then more as the financial records Claire had uploaded continued to unspool across secure servers and unsecured news feeds alike. Bank accounts frozen across 4 continents. A foundation that had existed for 2 decades quietly dismantled by agencies that had been looking for a reason to touch it for years and had never had enough evidence until now. Political careers that had survived everything except this. The names read like a guest list to a different kind of gala. The kind where power makes its real trades in rooms that do not have cameras. Till now. The story of what happened on the 43rd floor of the Hartwell Tower was told 100 ways in the days that followed, and in every version a few things were missing. The names of the 2 people who had walked off the roof before the authorities arrived. The footage from the northeast corner camera that had been scrubbed from public access within 6 hours of the broadcast. The identity of the woman who had uploaded the ledger, and the man who had made sure she survived long enough to do it. They did not appear in any of the official reports. They were not listed among the missing or the found. They were simply absent, the kind of absence that looks deliberate from every angle. Somewhere beyond the city, on a road that ran through snow-covered nothing in all directions, a car moved through the dark. The driver had his right hand on the wheel and his left arm in a proper field dressing that needed a real doctor within the next few hours. The passenger had her eyes on the road ahead, not behind her, and her hands were folded in her lap with the stillness of someone who had finally, after a very long time, stopped bracing for the next thing. They had not spoken much since the rooftop. But it was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of people who have been through something together and are still processing the fact that they came out the other side. After a long time she said, "Where are we going?" Lucien considered the question. He had safe houses in 4 countries and resources in several more. He had enemies in most of the same places. He had spent 11 years building a life designed for one person moving through the world alone, and he had gotten very good at it. And it had cost him something he had not allowed himself to name until tonight. "Somewhere warm," he said. Claire looked at him. And for the first time since he had watched her move through a ballroom full of beautiful, dangerous people and noticed that she was the most dangerous one of all, she almost smiled. The car moved on through the snow and the city fell away behind them, and somewhere in the wreckage of Vincent Kesler's empire, the truth was still spreading. Account by account, name by name, message by message. The way all things spread when they have been contained too long. Like fire. Like water. Like the kind of trust that forms between 2 people in the dark when the only thing keeping either of them alive is the decision to believe in the other one. It moves quietly at first. Then it moves everywhere. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story.